A Happy Death by Albert Camus. Literary Quotes. The following video content presents and discusses literary quotes crafted to enhance your academic study, deepen literary analysis, and inspire your writing. If you're interested in Albert Camus's philosophy quotes, click the link below or explore our channel's philosophy series. Albert Camus's A Happy Death offers a rare glimpse into the early creative mind of the author, written before his acclaimed novel, The Stranger. Through the protagonist, Patrice Meursault, the novel explores themes that would recur throughout Camus' later work: the pursuit of happiness, existential freedom, and the confrontation with mortality. Set against vivid backdrops that evoke the beauty of Algeria and the cold alienation of Central Europe, the novel reflects Camus's philosophical musings on life, death, and what it means to truly live. The protagonist's journey becomes an intimate reflection of Camus's own struggles and joys, echoing his love of the sea and sun, as well as his complex relationships with people around him. Quote 1. I am doing away with only half a man. It need cause no problem. There is more than enough here to pay off those who have taken care of me till now. Please use what is left over to improve conditions of the men in death row. But I know it's asking a lot. Zagreus's statement, written in his final note, conveys his pragmatic and somewhat resigned view of his own life and fate, acknowledging his physical disability. The quote reveals his intent to alleviate the suffering of others, even in his last act, suggesting a complex character who, despite planning his own end, considers the welfare of death row inmates. This consideration points to his empathy and his desire to make a meaningful impact, even posthumously. His acknowledgement that his request might be asking too much reflects an understanding of the limitations and indifference of society towards marginalized individuals. Quote 2. Everything in Meursault fell silent. He sneezed a third time and shivered feverishly. Then he hurried away without glancing around him, the suitcase creaking, his footsteps loud on the road. This moment captures Meursault's acute sense of isolation and alienation following the act of killing Zagreus. The silence around him underscores his solitude, and possibly his regret or resignation. His physical reactions, sneezing and shivering, could symbolize a subconscious revolt against his actions or a sudden awareness of his vulnerability. The loudness of his footsteps and the creaking suitcase amplify the weight of his guilt, making his departure from the scene a vividly drawn picture of a man both fleeing and unavoidably connected to his deed. The description evokes a sensory and psychological depth, illustrating how Meursault is engulfed by his environment and the enormity of his actions. Quote 3. The day split open down the middle, crushing the docks under the burden of its heat. This vivid description encapsulates the oppressive heat of a summer day, personifying the day itself as a force that physically impacts the environment. It conveys the intensity of the sun and its effects on the workers and the physical landscape, creating a tangible sense of exhaustion and struggle. The imagery of the day splitting open and crushing suggests an almost violent confrontation between nature and the people working at the docks, emphasizing the harsh conditions they endure. This serves to set the scene for the following events and underscores the physicality and immediacy of their laborious work. Quote 4. Serves him right, Meursault said. Oh, you can't be a bastard in life. This guy took it while he had it, and he was right. Almost 1,000,000 francs he had. Now, if it had been me. In this exchange, Meursault reflects on the transient nature of success and fortune, acknowledging the inevitability of life's ups and downs. His reaction to the story of a man who lost his wealth, serves him right, illustrates a certain stoicism and perhaps a schadenfreude that highlights his detached and existential outlook. This moment reveals Meursault's philosophy of making the most of the good times without pretensions or false dignity, as he fantasizes about what he would do if he had wealth. His comment encapsulates his approach to life, one that embraces the moment without grand expectations, reflecting a broader existential theme of living authentically and without illusions. Quote 5. Another Sunday shot, Meursault said. Meursault's succinct comment captures a recurring theme of existential indifference and resignation to the routine and sometimes monotonous flow of life. This phrase reflects his perception of time as fleeting and often wasted, encapsulated in a day that ends without significant events or accomplishments. It underlines a broader existential malaise, where days blend indistinguishably into one another, each marked by the quiet despair of unrealized potential and the ceaseless passing of time. This kind of statement characterizes Meursault's disengagement from the societal norms that dictate how one should value time and experiences, pointing instead to a personal struggle with finding meaning in the everyday. Quote 6. Do you have to know? No, Meursault said. This brief exchange reveals much about Meursault's relationship dynamics and his approach to personal connections. It highlights his sometimes apathetic yet curiously detached stance towards knowing deeper details about others, suggesting a complex interplay between desire for knowledge and the resignation of its potential impact. This dialogue encapsulates his existential questioning of the necessity and burden of knowledge, portraying his interaction with Martha as a microcosm of broader social interactions. Meursault's response reflects his internal conflict between curiosity and the preference to remain unaffected by deeper emotional entanglements, suggesting his overarching desire to avoid the discomfort that often accompanies closer personal scrutiny. Quote 7. I feel like getting married, or committing suicide, or subscribing to l'illustration. Something desperate, you know. Meursault's statement reveals his feeling of utter disorientation and his craving for drastic change. He uses contrasting options like marriage, suicide, or subscribing to a magazine, each a symbolic gesture towards life, death, or the mundane, to articulate his restless, almost absurd need for something to break the monotony of his existence. The juxtaposition of these options highlights the existential crisis he faces, the desire to escape his current dissatisfaction by taking any action, however contradictory or meaningless. This moment encapsulates Meursault's search for purpose amidst the pressures of conventional life, expressing both a humorous resignation and an underlying despair at the lack of fulfillment. Quote 8. You know, a man always judges himself by the balance he can strike between the needs of his body and the demands of his mind. This insight from Zagreus underscores the internal conflict that many individuals face between physical desires and intellectual aspirations. It emphasizes the importance of balance in achieving personal satisfaction, with Meursault seemingly at odds with this equilibrium. Zagreus's statement is significant in that it defines part of Meursault's struggle, as he feels torn between his unfulfilled needs and his aspirations for a more meaningful existence. The idea that one judges oneself by such a balance touches on the existential theme of self-awareness, pointing to the core of Meursault's dissatisfaction, his inability to harmonize his physical life with his intellectual and emotional expectations. Quote 9. For 20 years, I've been unable to have the experience of a certain happiness. This life which devours me, I won't have known it to the full. And what frightens me about death is the certainty it will bring me that my life has been consummated without me. Zagreus's words express a deep sense of regret and longing for the unfulfilled potential of his life. He articulates the fear of dying without truly experiencing or embracing what life has to offer, a sentiment born from his physical limitations and his thwarted ambitions. This reflects a broader human fear of time slipping away before one can truly live, resonating with the existential anxiety over the search for meaning and the feeling of life's passing without genuine fulfillment. Zagreus's reflection poignantly underscores the fragility of existence and the struggle to achieve a life that feels whole, a struggle intensified by his disability. Quote 10. Don't take anything seriously except happiness. Think about it, Mersault. You have a pure heart. Think about it. Zagreus's advice to Mersault emphasizes the value of pursuing happiness as the ultimate purpose in life, and it reveals his belief that everything else is less important compared to this pursuit. He urges Mersault to focus solely on finding joy and fulfillment, discarding the burdens that society places on seriousness. By calling Mersault's heart pure, Zagreus points out a quality he perceives as crucial for experiencing genuine happiness. This statement underscores the existential theme that happiness is a deliberate choice, despite life's challenges. Zagreus's insistence encourages Mersault to strip away unnecessary complexities and confront his own potential for joy, urging a deeper introspection on what it means to truly live. Quote 11. Now, as whenever he found himself confronting a brutal manifestation of life, Mersault was powerless, filled with respect for that animal pain. This reflection on Mersault's reaction to Cardona's grief shows his struggle when facing raw, uncontrollable human emotions. He feels powerless in the face of such primal suffering, unable to offer real comfort or a solution. The phrase animal pain emphasizes the deeply instinctive nature of Cardona's grief, a kind of anguish that transcends rational thought or societal expectations. Mersault's respect for this pain illustrates his understanding of its authenticity, suggesting that moments like these are rare, undiluted expressions of the human condition. It is a moment that forces Mersault to acknowledge a depth of feeling that contrasts sharply with his own often detached demeanor. Quote 12. Today, in the face of objection and solitude, his heart said, "No." And in the great distress that washed over him, Mersault realized that his rebellion was the only authentic thing in him, and that everything else was misery and submission. Mersault's realization that his rebellion is the only true aspect of himself reflects a moment of existential clarity. Faced with Cardona's despair and the bleakness of his environment, Mersault understands that his refusal to accept such objection is the one force that still gives him a sense of identity and purpose. This rebellion becomes a symbol of his defiance against a meaningless existence, highlighting the existential struggle between submission to life's suffering and the fight to create one's own meaning. The phrase reveals that, for Mersault, resisting the inertia of misery is the core of his being, while everything else, all conformity and resignation, is a form of personal betrayal. Quote 13. Sometimes there are days when you'd like to change places with him, but sometimes it takes more courage to live than to shoot yourself. Martha's statement reflects the existential struggle of choosing between life and death. She acknowledges the allure of escape through death, but also recognizes the immense courage required to continue living, especially amidst suffering. This quote speaks to the burden of existence that Camus often explores, the idea that enduring life's absurdities demands a certain bravery that surpasses the seemingly easier option of ending it. Martha's observation resonates with Mersault's own internal battles, where the challenge lies not in simply facing death, but in embracing the difficulties of life, day after day. Quote 14. He was flooded by a dreadful pleasure at the prospect of so much desolation and solitude. Mersault's reaction to his surroundings shows his complex relationship with loneliness and alienation. This dreadful pleasure suggests a twisted comfort he finds in being detached from everything familiar, almost as if the extreme solitude allows him to face a part of himself that is otherwise hidden. The phrase captures Mersault's dual nature, yearning for connection yet finding solace in isolation. It emphasizes the theme of existential alienation, where the protagonist finds meaning, however dismal, in embracing the bleakness of his circumstances, acknowledging his freedom from societal expectations. Quote 15. The very monotony of the journey satisfied him. The train which was jolting him halfway across Europe suspended him between two worlds. It had taken him abroad, and would deposit him somewhere, draw him out of a life the very moment of which he wanted to erase, and lead him to the threshold of a new world, where desire would be king. Meursault finds a peculiar contentment in the repetitive nature of the train journey, which provides an escape from his previous life and the emotional weight it carried. Being suspended between two worlds symbolizes his desire for transformation and the hope of starting afresh, unburdened by the past. The train becomes a liminal space, a metaphorical bridge from his disillusionment to a potential new beginning defined by freedom and desire. This moment highlights his longing for a new existence, one where he can reshape his identity without the constraints of his previous life, reflecting the human need for change and the pursuit of a self-defined purpose. Quote 16. He loved these long nights when the train rushed along the gleaming rails, roaring through the village stations where only a clock was illuminated, the sudden stops among the clustered lights of city stations where there was no time to discover where he was before the train was already swallowed up. Meursault's love for these long nights on the train reveals his attraction to transience and the unknown. The imagery of the train rushing through illuminated village stations reflects his desire for the fleeting, the impermanence of experiences that are neither fully grasped nor examined. This journey, characterized by swift stops and incomprehensible locations, symbolizes his attempt to escape his past and his struggles, even if momentarily. The setting of the train and the night emphasizes a liminal space, neither fully here nor there, which mirrors his mental state. He finds solace in this suspension between destinations, where he is temporarily free from responsibilities and the weight of his existential turmoil, embracing the anonymity and fluidity of travel. Quote 17. Between the desolate earth and the colorless sky appeared an image of the ungrateful world in which, for the first time, he came to himself at last. Meursault's vision of the desolate landscape between earth and sky serves as a powerful symbol of his inner realization. The barren, colorless imagery reflects the bleakness of his emotional landscape, mirroring his struggle with the meaninglessness of existence. In this emptiness, Meursault finds a moment of self-awareness, a stark confrontation with himself that strips away all illusions. The phrase, "came to himself at last," implies a moment of profound clarity, where he fully acknowledges the world's indifference and his place within it. This realization brings both despair and a sense of authenticity, as Meursault accepts his solidarity with a world that offers neither comfort nor gratitude, but simply is. Quote 18. Then Meursault realized that not once since Vienna had he thought of Zagreus as the man he had killed with his own hands. Meursault's realization that he has not thought of Zagreus since Vienna highlights his ability to detach himself from the act of killing. This detachment reflects both his emotional distance from moral conventions and his focus on pursuing a life unburdened by guilt. The absence of thoughts about Zagreus suggests that Meursault's journey has led him away from his past actions, allowing him to embrace a renewed sense of self. This moment underscores the theme of existential freedom, the idea that the past does not necessarily define one's future. Meursault's power to forget aligns him with the innocent and the free, emphasizing his capacity to start anew without the weight of remorse. Quote 19. The house above the world trained its huge bay windows on a carnival of colors and lights, day and night. The description of the house above the world highlights its position as a place detached from ordinary concerns, elevated above the struggles of everyday life. The carnival of colors and lights that it overlooks symbolizes the vibrancy of existence that the house's inhabitants can witness without being directly involved. This setting reflects a kind of utopia, where Patrice, Catherine, and the others are free to observe the world's beauty without being weighed down by its hardships. It represents an idealized detachment and a sense of freedom. Physically elevated, they are metaphorically liberated from the mundane, allowing them to embrace the simple joys of life and exist in harmony with the world around them. Quote 20. The house above the world, they said among themselves, was not a house of pleasure. It was a house of happiness. This quote captures the essence of what the inhabitants strive for, a deeper fulfillment that goes beyond transient pleasures. The distinction between pleasure and happiness is significant, emphasizing that their aim is to achieve something more lasting and meaningful. In this house of happiness, there is a conscious effort to cultivate an environment of simplicity, connection, and contentment. The emphasis on happiness rather than hedonistic pleasure underlines a philosophical pursuit, where the characters are engaged in a deliberate effort to lead lives that are genuinely fulfilling. The house becomes a sanctuary, where they are able to experiment with ways of living that are attuned to their individual desires and needs, while also fostering an intimate bond with each other and the world. Quote 21. In the sky, night showed them its shining face, radiant and secret. Lights passed far below in the harbor, and the screech of trains occasionally reached them. This imagery of night and the distant city below reflects the atmosphere of tranquility and introspection that characterizes the house above the world. The radiant yet secret nature of the night suggests something both beautiful and mysterious, a vastness that inspires awe. The distant lights and sounds of the harbor represent the connection to the broader world, reminding the inhabitants that they are part of something larger while still being removed from it. This distance allows them to engage with the world on their own terms, fostering a sense of freedom and contemplation. The scene embodies a moment of unity between the characters and their surroundings, a shared silence that speaks to the deep connection they feel with the natural beauty around them and the expansive, unknowable universe. Quote 22. Never give up, Catherine. You have so much inside you, and the noblest sense of happiness of all. Meursault's words to Catherine reveal his perception of her potential and the depth of her character. He encourages her to seek happiness within herself rather than relying on external sources, particularly a man. This advice reflects his belief in personal independence and the idea that true contentment comes from within. Meursault sees Catherine as possessing a unique and noble understanding of happiness, something that sets her apart from others. By advising her not to give up, he acknowledges the struggle inherent in finding one's path, but also the reward of self-reliance. This moment reflects Meursault's broader existential philosophy that happiness is a personal endeavor, cultivated from within rather than granted by others. Quote 23. With this night, this sea, and this flesh under my fingers. This quote captures Meursault's desire to find fulfillment in the immediate physical aspects of existence. The night, the sea, and the sensation of touch all symbolize his connection to the tangible world, emphasizing his search for meaning through sensory experiences. Rather than relying on abstract ideas or emotional attachments, Meursault turns to the physical world around him, which he can experience directly. This reflects his existential approach to life, focusing on what is real and present, instead of delving into complexities or seeking meaning beyond the observable. This emphasis on the tangible and the physical conveys Meursault's belief in the importance of direct experience as the foundation of his happiness. Quote 24. Day after day, Meursault let himself sink into his life, as if he were sliding into water. This metaphor captures Meursault's gradual immersion into the rhythm of his new life, which is portrayed as something natural and effortless, like slipping into water. It evokes a sense of surrender, as he allows himself to become a part of his surroundings without resistance or questioning. The comparison to water suggests both fluidity and an acceptance of being carried along by life's currents. Meursault's life in the Chunua is one of simplicity and connection to nature, where his essential gestures keep him grounded and present. This quote reveals his existential journey toward finding peace and truth in the mundane and physical aspects of life, emphasizing his desire to live authentically and without the burden of unnecessary complexities. Quote 25. What matters, all that matters really, is the will to happiness, a kind of enormous, ever-present consciousness. Meursault's statement to Catherine emphasizes his belief that happiness is not about achieving specific conditions or fulfilling particular desires, but rather about maintaining a constant and deliberate will to be happy. This enormous, ever-present consciousness of happiness is something he sees as independent of external factors, such as success, relationships, or artistic pursuits. By focusing on the internal resolve to be happy, Meursault rejects the idea that happiness depends on external circumstances, instead asserting that it is a mindset, a choice one must actively make. This quote underscores his existential philosophy that fulfillment is ultimately an internal pursuit, shaped by one's determination rather than by the fulfillment of external conditions. Quote 26. Only today did his solitude become real, for only today did he feel bound to it. Meursault's realization about his solitude comes as he watches his friends leave, and it is only in their absence that he fully understands the nature of his isolation. Before this moment, his solitude was something he had chosen and sought, but now it has become an undeniable reality, something he is bound to. The acknowledgement of his solitude marks a significant turning point in his journey, where he not only accepts it, but also recognizes its inevitability and importance. This binding to solitude brings with it a sense of freedom, as it signifies that he is now fully committed to the path he has chosen, ready to face his existence without distraction. This solitude, though tinged with melancholy, represents the acceptance of his independence and the mastery over his own fate, which he sees as essential to experiencing true happiness. Quote 27. The evening falling on the world, on the path between the olives and the gum trees, on the vines and the red soil, near the sea which whispered softly, this evening flowed into him like a tide. Meursault's connection with the world around him is deeply reflected in this quote, where the natural elements become a part of him. The imagery of the evening flowing into him like a tide suggests a profound sense of harmony between Meursault and his surroundings. It captures a moment of total immersion in the environment, where the external world and his internal self seem to merge. The tranquility of the scene, with the path, the vines, the soil, and the sea, represents Meursault's acceptance of the present, his feeling of being at one with the earth. This moment symbolizes the culmination of his journey towards finding peace and meaning in the physical world, rather than in abstract ideals or human relationships. His acceptance of the world as it is, in its raw beauty, brings him a sense of fulfillment that transcends the complications of human existence. Quote 28. He thought of Lucien's face he had caressed, and the warmth of her lips. The moon poured its long, straying smiles like oil on the water's smooth surface. The sea would be warm as a mouth, and as soft, ready to yield beneath a man's weight. Meursault's thoughts here blend memories of intimacy with the physical world, as he equates the warmth of Lucien's lips with the warmth of the sea under the moonlight. The sensual imagery, where the sea is described as warm and yielding like a body, reflects Meursault's deep longing for connection, not necessarily with people, but with the world in its entirety. This moment shows how Meursault's sense of intimacy is fulfilled by nature, just as much, if not more, than by human contact. His relationship with the sea symbolizes his desire to lose himself in something greater, to merge with the world rather than stand apart from it. This blending of human affection with the natural elements illustrates his existential quest for meaning through the sensory and immediate, rather than the abstract or distant. Quote 29. For he had played his part, fashioned his role, perfected man's one duty, which is only to be happy. Meursault reflects on his life with a sense of fulfillment, believing that he has succeeded in his most important task, finding happiness. His acknowledgement of this duty as the primary aim underscores his existential belief that life's purpose lies in the pursuit of personal contentment, free from external obligations or moral judgments. Meursault's sense of accomplishment comes not from adhering to societal norms, but from embracing his own desires and living authentically. By fashioning his role in life with the sole objective of being happy, he has fulfilled what he believes is his singular purpose. This statement captures the core of his philosophy, that happiness is the highest achievement, and that living consciously and fully is the only real goal worth striving for. Quote 30. The new day was cool, filled with the sound of birds. The sun rose quickly, and in a single leap was above the horizon. The earth was covered with gold, with warmth. This opening imagery portrays a vivid and almost triumphant beginning of the day, emphasizing the beauty and power of the natural world. The rapid rise of the sun, spreading warmth and golden light, symbolizes renewal and vitality. For Meursault, this setting represents both the continuity of life and the transient moments of peace that he finds in nature. The descriptions of light, warmth, and the presence of birds illustrate the harmony between Meursault and his surroundings, emphasizing how deeply he is affected by the beauty of the natural world. This imagery serves to highlight Meursault's sense of connectedness to the environment and his desire to live fully, appreciating every moment of existence that aligns with his pursuit of happiness. Quote 31. In a minute, in a second, he thought. The ascent stopped, and stone among the stones, he returned in the joy of his heart to the truth of the motionless worlds. Meursault's reflection here captures the profound acceptance of his own mortality, finding solace in the inevitability of death. The phrase, stone among the stones, symbolizes his merging with the natural world, indicating his readiness to become a part of something larger and more permanent. His ascent stopping marks a moment of realization and surrender, where he acknowledges the timelessness of existence and his own small part within it. The joy of his heart suggests that he finds genuine contentment in this understanding, embracing the motionless, unchanging nature of the world around him. This acceptance of death as a natural and even joyful conclusion to life is central to Meursault's pursuit of a happy death, underlining the existential theme of finding peace in the face of life's ultimate end. Quote 32. Happiness, too, is a long patience, and time is the need for money which robs us of it. Time can be bought. Everything can be bought. To be rich is to have time to be happy when one is worthy of being so. This quote encapsulates the central philosophy that Meursault derives from Zagreus, the idea that happiness is intrinsically tied to having the time to enjoy life. In this view, wealth becomes not an end in itself, but a means to gain the freedom necessary for true contentment. Meursault recognizes that in order to achieve happiness, one needs time that is often consumed by the demands of survival and work. Therefore, money is seen as a tool to buy back that time. The notion that happiness is a long patience suggests that true fulfillment requires not just freedom from economic pressures, but also the ability to endure and embrace the slow passage of time without constant distraction. This perspective highlights Meursault's existential approach to life, focusing on the deliberate pursuit of happiness through the freedom to live without the constant pressures of society's demands. In A Happy Death, Camus brings readers face to face with the stark realities of human existence: alienation, desire, and the relentless pursuit of happiness. Patrice Meursault's journey ultimately reveals that to achieve a happy death, one must learn to live authentically, embracing both the beauty and the suffering inherent in life. This early work not only foreshadows Camus' later existential thought, but also reminds us that the pursuit of happiness, no matter how fraught, is what gives life its deepest meaning. Through Meursault's experience, Camus leaves us with a haunting yet profound reflection on the nature of existence.
Curious to dive into the mind of Albert Camus? With StudyLab Pro's Book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of a happy death in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.